Good morning. Thank you very much for your kind words. Well, I'm extremely happy that we finally have a government. It took quite some time. It was not an easy ride, but we finally have a government, a coalition government, for the first time in Spain. This is very common in other European countries, but it's the first in our country. And we have started on the right path. On the economic policy front, we are very clear about a continuity message, in the sense that for the past 19 months, we have followed a policy based on 3 lines: fiscal responsibility, social sensitivity, structural reforms, and these will be the 3 main guiding lines for us also in the coming years.
Minister, if I can say this, the copy I've been reading says you are a strong counterweight to the aspirations of Mr. Iglesias, and where he might want to bring in extra bank taxes, rent controls, reversal of labour reforms. I don't know if you typify yourself as that, but I mean, would you like to explain some of the tensions within government about where you go next?
Well, obviously, a coalition government is somewhat different to a one-party government, in that we need to strike balances between the different approaches. The basic lines are common, are shared. We all want our country to grow, to prosper, and also to redress the inequalities which rose due to the crisis. But what we have signed with Podemos is a governing agreement, a coalition agreement, which is very clear about striking the right balance with continuing growth, pursuing entrepreneurship, pursuing those reforms that we have been launching in the last months, and at the same time having a deep focus on redressing inequalities. As I was saying, the rise of inequalities is one of the wounds we're still carrying from the crisis, and I think this is key to address these issues if we want political and economic stability too.
The key to that, of course, is to get Europe growing strongly again, and the pressure is on Germany and the Netherlands to use whatever fiscal headroom they have to help stimulate activity through fiscal spending. To what extent do you feel that it is time for the Germans and the Dutch to get on with it to help the EU?
Well, my sense is that these countries are perfectly aware of the role they have, particularly Germany, which is the largest economy, is one of the motors of the Union. Although I have to say we all have to play our part. Spain has been registering very strong growth for the past 5 years, above 2.5% average. We closed last year in a slowdown environment, still at around 2% year-on-year growth. So Spain also is one of the 4 large economies, and we need to play our part to continue to be one of the motors for growth. I don't think that we should focus on just one country doing that job. We all have to undertake our reforms and ensure that we have solid, sustainable growth in the mid-run.
We still have a European Central Bank that's focused on very low interest rates, negative rates in some cases. Is it time, given that we see these green shoots of recovery, and obviously you note Spain's growth, is it time actually that some of these economies were helped by more positive rates that promote and improve the rational allocation of capital for economic activity?
Well, this is a tricky question, because if I comment on monetary policy, I would provoke a conflict, between ministers and central bankers. So I wouldn't dare to tell the central bank what they should do. Let me just say I welcome very much that the new chair of the European Central Bank, Madame Lagarde, she has launched a strategic reflection, a strategic review on a monetary policy instrument. And I think this is very timely and very welcome, so that we see how best to articulate the different instruments of economic policy in the coming months to ensure that Europe restores or recovers stronger growth levels.
But the banking system has had the foot on its throat, restraining its ability to grow through net interest margin improvements. I understand your reticence to kick off a row here, but even the Spanish banks, I'm going to go and talk with Santander next week. Even the Spanish banks, I think, would like to see an improvement in the operating environment for 2020, but there's no evidence that that's going to happen yet.
Well, it's a two-sided coin, because on the one hand, it's true that profits and margins for banks, particularly retail banks, are suffering because of low interest rates. At the same time, these low interest rates have allowed growth to continue, and this is good for banks' profits and profitability and business. So I think, the jury is still out on whether this has been mostly net positive or negative for the banking sector. What I think is that the banks are adjusting to this new situation. They're looking for new business opportunities. They are becoming much more profitable and much more efficient. The Spanish banking sector, I see it, is in a deep transformation process, also a digitalization process. And this is the right thing to do. When the environment is changing, you have to adapt. These, of course, notwithstanding the fact that, as I said before, I think it's good that the European Central Bank starts looking into how to find a new articulation of the different instruments of economic policy to have stronger growth.
Minister, your focus is also on foreign affairs, and now that the British are leaving imminently the European Union, that will be a foreign affairs issue as well. I know you're very diplomatic about the ECB. I'm sure you'll be equally diplomatic in my next question. But how much of a grip on reality has the UK Foreign Secretary, the UK Brexit Secretary and the Prime Minister got on the timescale for Brexit? It seems that people such as yourself and Mr Raab, Mr Barclay and Mr Johnson are not having a meeting of minds on timescale.
Well, I had the chance to have an exchange with the Chancellor yesterday, actually, in Brussels, in the margins of ECOFIN, and he was conveying to me how fantastic Brexit is going to be, how magnificent the negotiations will be, and how fast we're going to.
How did you feel about that, Minister?
Well, I tried very discreetly, very diplomatically, as you say, to bring it to his mind that this is going to be maybe more challenging than they think. I think it is urgent for us to engage and to see how to have a more stable relationship going forward. Spain will play its part. We have been very constructive until now when we were discussing the leave agreement. Now we will be constructive thinking about the future relationship. But this is a major endeavor, and we will have to put a lot of energy if we want this to succeed.